News, Kaya Kallas supports Palestine governing Gaza and condemns settler violence. Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for missile and drone attacks on Israeli airport and U.S. warships. And U.S.-led talks in Saudi Arabia with Russia and Ukraine progress positively. It's 10 a.m. Cairo local time, and you're watching Qnews, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Kaya Kallas, has stated that the European Union sees the Palestinian Authority as best placed to govern Gaza. After a meeting with the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa during a visit to Ramallah in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, Kallas told reporters at a joint news conference that the EU condemns the resumption of war in Gaza and supports a return to the ceasefire. Addressing the situation in the West Bank, Kallas added that settler violence and new settlements under construction are undermining the prospects of a two-state solution, which she called the only path to sustainable peace.
All hostages. Israel must fully reinstate humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Israeli airstrikes have targeted a tent housing displaced families in western Qnews and Gaza, killing 3 Palestinians and injuring others, mostly children. Earlier airstrikes on a home in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza resulted in the deaths of 3 more, including a child, and injured 10 others. The death toll from ongoing strikes since Monday morning has surpassed 60. The United Nations has decided to scale back its operations in Gaza following deadly Israeli airstrikes that killed hundreds of civilians, including UN personnel. UN spokesperson Stephane Dujarric stressed that while the UN remains in Gaza, it faces growing risks as aid remains blocked since early March. An Israeli tank shell hit a UN compound in Deir al-Balah on Monday 19, killing a Bulgarian staff member and injuring 6 others. The UN condemned the attack, urged an independent investigation, and renewed calls for a ceasefire and hostage release. Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for global pressure to end the conflict and protect civilians.
I repeat, the United Nations is not leaving Gaza. We remain committed to continuing to provide.
Egypt has strongly condemned Israel's announcement of a new agency aimed at displacing Palestinians from Gaza and its approval of 13 new settlements in the occupied West Bank. In a statement, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry rejected Israel's claim of voluntary departure, calling it forced displacement and a violation of international law. Cairo urged the international community and the UN Security Council to take firm action to uphold Palestinian rights and enforce international legitimacy. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has condemned the establishment by the Israeli occupation of an agency to steer the displacement of Palestinians and the approval of a plan to separate 13 settlement outposts in the West Bank. Saudi Arabia condemned Israel's plan to oversee Palestinian displacement from Gaza and legalize 13 Jewish-only settlements in the West Bank. Foreign Ministry reaffirmed its rejection of Israel's violations of international law and stressed that lasting peace requires recognizing Palestinian rights, including an independent state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Germany has condemned the Israeli government for legalizing 13 settlement outposts in the occupied West Bank. At a Berlin press conference, German Foreign Ministry spokesman Christian Wagner condemned the controversial move as violating international law and undermining a two-state solution. He expressed deep concern over civilian deaths in Gaza, warning of a worsening humanitarian crisis. Wagner criticized Israeli Minister Israel Katz's threats of Gaza's destruction as unacceptable and condemned Israel's blockade of water, electricity and aid. He urged Israel to restore humanitarian access and uphold international law. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, has condemned Israeli attacks on Nasser Hospital in Qnews. Olga Cherevoko, a spokesperson for the agency, stated that more lives and the very existence of Gaza are at stake. She added that the calls for this madness to stop have gone unheeded, and the bloody stain on the collective consciousness can only be undone if the world acts now. Doctors Without Borders, known by its French acronym MSF, has condemned the Israeli attack on Nasser Hospital that killed a top Hamas leader and a 16-year-old boy. The group condemned the attack as showing total disregard for medical facilities, patients and staff. Several of its staff were at Gaza's largest functioning hospital during the strike, with one describing the panic. Thousands of children in Gaza suffer life-changing amputations from the ongoing war on Gaza. Gaza's war has left thousands of children with amputated limbs, described by the UN as the largest cohort of child amputees in modern history. Israel's recent bombardment, killing over 500 and breaking the ceasefire, added to their numbers. With limited aid, these children face both physical and psychological trauma. Moving on to Yemen, where the Houthi group has claimed a series of missile and drone attacks targeting the Ben Gurion airport in Israel and U.S. warships in the Red Sea. In a televised statement, the group's military spokesman, Yahya Saraya, claimed that the group's missile force successfully targeted Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv with 2 ballistic missiles. One of the missiles was identified as the Dhul-Faqar, while the other was a Palestine II hypersonic missile. Saraya added that the operation lasted several hours and disrupted an aerial attack that the U.S. military was allegedly preparing against Yemen. The U.S. military has launched a series of intense airstrikes on Yemen's northern Sa'da province. According to Houthi media, a total of 12 airstrikes were carried out, 9 targeting the city of Sa'da and its surroundings, while 3 hit the districts of Saqain, Qutaf and Sahar. The U.S. Central Command posted a video on X showing fighter jets taking off from a runway. The post, published in the early hours of the morning, followed reports from Yemeni media of renewed U.S. attacks on Sa'da province. The American strikes aimed at countering threats to maritime trade in Israel have now entered their 10th day with no signs of stopping. The White House has stated that top Trump administration officials mistakenly disclosed war plans in a messaging group that included a journalist shortly before the United States attacked Yemen's Houthis. The alliance's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, reported that he was unexpectedly invited to an encrypted chat group on the Signal messaging app called the Houthi PC Small Group. In the group, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz tasked his deputy Alex Wong with setting up a Tiger team to coordinate U.S. action against the Houthis. Goldberg added that hours before the attacks on the Houthis on March 15 started, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted operational details about the plan in the messaging group.
Ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning.
American media outlets have reported that U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz may be forced to resign over the alleged military information leak. This comes after re-evaluation by the Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg that he was mistakenly added to a highly classified discussion about potential U.S. strikes on Yemen's Houthis. While some White House officials push for his dismissal, President Donald Trump will decide Waltz's fate in the coming days amid internal administration debates.
But I just want to push back on this notion of our European allies not being consulted.
U.S. forces have bombed Al-Rasul Al-Azzam Oncology Hospital for the second time in a week, leading to its destruction. The Anti-Cancer Fund condemned the attack as a grave and brutal war crime, calling it a systematic effort to destroy hope under blockade. It urged the UN and the WHO to act against the targeting of medical facilities. The newly built $3.3 million cancer hospital was near completion to serve hundreds of patients. In Jordan, Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi has met with his Lebanese counterpart Youssef Rajhi to discuss strengthening bilateral ties and the evolving situation in Lebanon. Both ministers emphasized the need to halt Israeli aggression and fully implement the ceasefire agreement between Lebanon and Israel. Al-Safadi reiterated Jordan's unwavering support for Lebanon's sovereignty and stability. Rajhi praised Jordan's role in rallying international support for a ceasefire, and both sides agreed to deepen cooperation in various areas. In Syria, the Israeli occupation military has announced launching air attacks on the Syrian air bases of Tadmor and Tifar. In a post on X, the military said that it struck the remaining military capabilities in the airfields located near the city of Palmyra and Homs. The attacks come days after the Israeli military bombed the same bases. Earlier, the EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, said that Israel's strikes on Syria, as well as Lebanon, risked further escalation. And we now move to the latest developments in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. A White House source has stated that U.S.-led talks in Saudi Arabia with Ukrainian and Russian delegations are progressing well, with a positive announcement expected soon. This comes as technical teams representing President Donald Trump are coordinating efforts day and night. Meanwhile, Ukrainian broadcasters reported that Ukrainian and American delegations will meet tomorrow for follow-up discussions on a limited ceasefire proposal between Kiev and Moscow, with Ukraine extending its stay for further talks. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has emphasized that progress towards security and peace was needed as U.S. and Russian officials discussed a limited ceasefire at sea, hoping that it could lead to broader peace talks. Zelensky added that progress in the talks in Saudi Arabia, where a Ukrainian delegation was present on the sidelines, was necessary for all those in the world to seek stability in international relations. Zelensky also highlighted that a rescue operation was continuing in the city of Sumy after a Russian missile strike damaged a school and a hospital, wounding nearly 90 people, including 17 children. The talks, which focused, among other issues, on trying to reach a Black Sea maritime ceasefire deal, were portrayed by Washington as a step in President Donald Trump's effort to end the three-year-old war.
ДСНС України, Національна поліція, медичні служби, наші комунальні.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he expects a U.S.-Ukraine revenue-sharing agreement on Ukrainian critical minerals will be signed soon. Trump also told reporters that the United States is talking to Ukraine about the potential for American firms owning Ukrainian power plants. A U.S. delegation met with Ukrainian officials and with Russian officials in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The talks have focused mostly on a Black Sea ceasefire, but Trump said that other issues are coming up, such as territory demarcation and power plant ownership.
Steve Witkoff has been incredible. Michael Waltz. We have a great group of people working on it.
The Kremlin has stated that Russia and the United States had a common understanding on the need to move towards a settlement to end the conflict in Ukraine, but that there are still many different aspects that need to be worked out. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that negotiations in Saudi Arabia between Moscow and Washington are focused on technical issues, including the Black Sea Initiative, which is about the security of shipping in the region. Russia and Ukraine have reported shooting down a large number of each other's military drones, with the Russian side condemning Ukraine for attacking its oil transit station, to which Ukraine had made no response. Russia's defense ministry reported shooting down 227 Ukrainian drones in 24 hours, while striking 143 targets in Ukraine. It accused Ukraine of targeting Russian energy infrastructure, claiming drones attacked the oil station but were intercepted. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported 99 Russian attack drones overnight, shooting down 57. Its military said that forces engaged in 140 battles, hitting 13 Russian sites and repelling advances. Now we move on to Hani Saif in our newsroom. To you, Hani.
Thank you, Hela. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for all the economic updates and financial news happening from all around the world, so stay tuned. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued an executive order declaring that any country buying oil or gas from Venezuela will pay a 25% tariff on trades with the U.S. His administration extended the deadline for Chevron to wind down operations in Venezuela, easing pressure after the U.S. Treasury initially gave the company 30 days on March 4th to exit. Trump had ordered the wind down, accusing President Nicolas Maduro of failing to advance electoral reforms and migrant returns. On Monday, Treasury extended Chevron's license until May 27th, temporarily shifting U.S. pressure to other buyers of Venezuelan crude, such as China, though enforcement of tariffs remains unclear.
Saying that they had what?
They were using signal to coordinate on sensitive.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he will, in the very near future, announce tariffs on automobiles, aluminum and pharmaceuticals. Trump also urged the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates after the U.S. Central Bank last week kept them unchanged. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, speaking at the same meeting, said that on April 2nd, which Trump has targeted to impose a slew of tariffs, the United States will launch what he called the External Revenue Service.
Identified maybe $4 trillion worth of companies moving back or going to move back.
South Korea's Hyundai Motor Group has announced a $20 billion investment in the United States at the White House. The investment includes a $5 billion new steel plant in Louisiana, announced by President Donald Trump, Hyundai Chairman Woo Chung, and Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry. The announcement comes as Trump threatens to impose reciprocal tariffs on numerous countries on April 2nd, potentially targeting countries such as South Korea that have large trade surpluses with the United States.
Our largest U.S. invest ever.
South Korea's acting President Han Sak-doo has stated that he would do his best to weather a tariff storm triggered by the United States in a cabinet meeting in Seoul. A day after his reinstatement, Han urged cabinet members to protect national interests amid a trade war. South Korea, a top exporter, faces U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum and seeks exemptions from upcoming duties. South Korea has already seen U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum and has been seeking an exemption from reciprocal U.S. tariffs next month. These are all the economic news we have for now. Now we go back to Hela in the studio. Hela.
Thank you so much, Henny. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. EU's Kaja Kallas supports Palestine governing Gaza and condemns settler violence. Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for missile and drone attacks on Israeli airport and U.S. warships. And U.S.-led talks in Saudi Arabia with Russia and Ukraine progress positively. And this concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.